5:20 p.m. when police in Pine Bluff, Arkansas received multiple reports of shots fired at the Sunset Village apartments.
911. Somebody just got shot at Sunset Village. Ma'am? Somebody just got shot at Sunset!
We went back.
911, may I help you?
Back over there. 911, I need you out here. Somebody just got shot.
911. Would y'all please come to his apartment in Sunset? Please, this girl got shot at her chest.
I was the on-call detective. I received a call about a possible shooting victim that was laying at an apartment complex on the ground. Upon my arrival, there was a lot of people out. It was kind of chaotic. A lot of people were screaming. A lot of people was hollering at the police. I saw a man with the victim that rode on her back and was attempting to give her CPR. She had a single gunshot wound to the back.
Officers check her ID. They find out that she is a 21-year-old named Vanessa Bearden and a mom of 2.
Paramedics arrive on the scene moments later.
Vanessa's unresponsive, but they do find a pulse, so they're hopeful, and first responders are working really hard to save her life and rush her to the hospital.
Vanessa Bearden was born on May 15, 1990. She grew up just outside Pine Bluff on her family's farm.
My grandfather he was a farmer. He made sure that my grandma had all of this property for us. We have horses, geese, chickens. We used to get the chicken eggs.
By all accounts, they were a very loving, tight-knit family. Vanessa and her siblings were raised in the church, and she sang in the choir. In fact, she was the first Black altar girl of that church.
Vanessa, my auntie, she liked to ride horses, go to church. She was really family-oriented. She was respected a lot. Everybody knew that she was a good person.
One of her closest friends growing up was a girl named Kobe. Their families actually knew each other. They went to the same school, and in fact, they had a lot in common.
But Vanessa's idyllic childhood also came with some unique challenges.
She struggled with mental health issues like OCD and ADHD. The family didn't know what to do with that, unfortunately. So Vanessa, if she ever felt it was closing in, he wanted her to cut right through it.
In 2008, when Vanessa was 17 years old, she suffered a series of emotional blows. First, her father died of cancer. Then, her mother was diagnosed with the disease as well.
When Vanessa's father passed away and her mom got diagnosed with cancer, she really stepped up in the family. She helped with her brother and sister, she helped them do homework, as well as her niece, and really tried to keep the family together.
She did everything for us when my mama wasn't there. She basically taught us what we needed to know for school-wise. She was real smart.
Then, Vanessa discovered she was going to have a child of her own.
Now, Vanessa was a teenager when she found out she was pregnant. And it seemed that that boyfriend was not that great of a guy. But you know, Vanessa, she tried to make the relationship work anyway. She dropped out to have the baby, and she got her GED instead. Vanessa moves in with this guy, and after another year, she's pregnant with their second child. But it's very clear he's not cut out to be a husband or a father, so she finally leaves him.
To support her children as a single mother, Vanessa took classes to become a certified nursing assistant. She was inspired by her struggles with mental health to help others with similar issues.
After she got her certificate, Vanessa got a job at a daycare center. So she wanted to pursue a career in child psychology and counsel kids with mental illness so they wouldn't, have to go through what she did. And she kept taking courses at Southeastern Arkansas College.
She was in a helping field where, she was a CNA, she's working towards becoming an RN. So that's part of that field is making sure that people are being safe and being taken care of when they have needs they can't take care of themselves.
By the time she was 21, Vanessa had her hands full, juggling single motherhood, work, and school, as well as a new relationship.
He was really good to her, and that relationship became serious real quick. He even popped the question while they were looking for an apartment in Little Rock.
She's been shot outside an apartment building, and police want to know why.
She was 21, she had 2 kids. So this was shocking to a lot of people. Being shot in broad daylight, it's a scary scene. Whoever shot Vanessa definitely had a reason behind it, had a motive. It was intentional.
While on the scene, it was very chaotic. There was a lot of witnesses there from the different apartment complexes that was around in the area. So we had to secure the area and calm the scene down so we could figure out what was going on. Miss Vanessa Bearden, she did not live at the complex where she was found. So the question that needed to be answered was, why was she in that area? Was it a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, a significant other, attempted robbery? Why was she shot?
I'd like to thank our sponsor.
As doctors struggle to save the life of gunshot victim Vanessa Bearden, detectives with the Pine Bluff Police Department try to figure out exactly what happened.
There were multiple 911 calls coming into dispatch that day. There are reports of a woman being shot.
There are several apartment buildings all nearby, and many of the witnesses are residents who heard the commotion and also the gunshot. But what led up to this moment? They know from experience that time is not on their side. So police need to move quickly before witnesses scatter or decide to stay silent.
I believe in a lot of small communities, especially African-American communities, there's not always a connection between the police and the community. In those communities, most individuals will take care of their own things. So if a problem is occurring, the authorities aren't always called in to settle disputes or things of that nature because there may be a lack of trust that is there.
Investigators start with the man who was giving Vanessa CPR when first responders arrived.
The Good Samaritan, who still has blood on his clothes, actually is the reverend of the church across the street where Vanessa got shot.
He heard some gunshots and then almost immediately heard some females screaming for some help. And he went to the area where they were and he discovered Vanessa Bearden and discovered that she had been shot. He began to give her first aid.
He says he saw a few girls running from the scene when he got there. He said he also saw a young lady in the breezeway with a gun. He said he didn't recognize her, but he feels confident that he could pick her out of a lineup.
The Reverend also gives police a pocket knife he found in Vanessa's waistband. He has no idea whether she used it during the fight.
Now, it's not uncommon that women carry knives. Sometimes it's for protection, when they're walking by themselves. Maybe some women who aren't comfortable carrying guns have been known to carry knives on them.
Pine Bluff is a bit on the rough areas, I won't lie. It has its nickname coined as Crime Bluff. Yeah. I carry a pocket knife for my protection. I have one in the car. I have one in my purse. It's just because as a female in Pine Bluff or as a Black female in general, I feel like it's important to just have some type of protection.
So investigators don't find any blood on the knife, so it definitely doesn't look like it's a stabbing. But there is a 9mm shell casing on the ground.
Police take the bullet casing into evidence, but there's little else to go on. They're hoping someone will be able to identify the suspected shooter, whom witnesses describe as a young African-American woman.
The apartments in this complex are really close together, and they're When something happens, someone will either hear it or see it. Police are interviewing everyone, and everyone pretty much had the same story.
It all began in the apartment parking lot earlier that day.
They said that the suspect was involved in an argument that escalated into an altercation with 8 females. They said also that they saw someone recording this fight on their phone.
There were people from all over those apartment complexes. There's 4 or 5 apartment complexes that sit right there in that 2 or 3 block area. There were 20, 30, maybe even 40 people there, all of them with cell phones.
The witnesses, however, were not sure what that initial fight was about, but a man broke it up and put the suspect in a car. They drove away, and the crowd dispersed. Now, a few of the other women involved in the fight stayed there, though.
A short while later, the suspect returns and approaches Vanessa and her friend through the apartment breezeway.
And the guy who broke up the fight is no longer with her, and now she's got a gun. She exchanges words with these other women, and it gets very heated. That's when she opens fire.
They hear a gunshot, and they see Vanessa collapse. They then see the shooter go over to Vanessa, stand over her, and then walk away.
Witnesses believe the shooter lives in the apartment complex. Luckily, someone comes forward who can identify her.
While police are still on the scene, a young lady comes up to one of the officers and introduces herself as Colby. She's Vanessa's friend and was also there when everything happened.
She says she knows exactly who the shooter is and why she did it. This was all about revenge.
Violent crimes are surprisingly common in Pine Bluff. Although there were only 50,000 people living in the city in 2011, it had all the problems of a larger urban area.
I think Pine Bluff has a lot of crime simply because it's not really much to do. It's not uncommon for people to walk around with guns or to just want to protect themselves in certain ways.
People die here every day, you know, people that you grow up with for no reason sometimes, you know. And, you know, it's sad.
Police in Pine Bluff, Arkansas are talking to Colby, who says she was with 21-year-old Vanessa Bearden when she was shot. According to Colby, the fight that led to the shooting started before they even got there.
Colby told the officers that she and her friends were there visiting another one of their friends by the name of Alicia.
A while later, Vanessa stopped by the apartment complex and was hanging out with Colby while waiting for her ride home.
Colby tells police that when she and Vanessa arrived, they started watching an argument that had started in the parking lot, which was between Alicia and another woman, Olivia Moody.
Colby tells the officers that Alicia and Olivia are arguing over a man.
She described how Alicia was now dating a young man that Olivia Moody used to be involved with, and how that caused some friction. And it ended up with Alicia and Olivia Moody getting into a fight.
And instead of being adult about it, they both was out there fighting.
Colby says the fight quickly drew a crowd of people. Some of them even joined in.
It's almost like being on a schoolyard, a playground. When the fight broke out, everybody that was around those apartment complexes came to watch and unfortunately egg it on. Mrs. Moody was just as involved in that provocation and those actions as Alicia was. She was not trying to escape them. She was not trying to get away from them. She was giving as good as she got.
Colby says Vanessa Bearden wasn't involved at first because she was recording the fight on her cell phone. After several minutes, someone finally intervened.
During the fight with Miss Moody. A friend of hers was able to pull her from the fight. Miss Moody, she noticed Miss Bearden recording the fight and proceeded towards her direction.
According to witness accounts, at that point, Olivia broke away from her friend and lunged towards Vanessa until the friend stopped her again.
He finally manages to break up the fight and gets Olivia to leave with him.
Alicia went back to her apartment, but Colby and Vanessa stayed outside a while longer. Colby now wishes they hadn't.
Colby and Vanessa decide to just take a breather, relax, cool off a bit. So they found an area in the complex, just kind of sit and talk.
The suspect drives by as a passenger in a vehicle and rolls down the window and hollers out the window something to the effect of, "I'll see you females later," except she didn't say female.
Colby says Vanessa showed her the knife that her dad gave her. Like she was ready if anything happens. But unfortunately, the knife was more of a security blanket than a weapon. Colby says she felt like Olivia was setting them up, and it turns out she was right.
Apparently, in that time, she went and got a gun and was trying to bait them back to fight.
Colby says she and Vanessa eventually decided to head back through the breezeway. That's when Olivia stepped around the corner.
She is walking towards them. And then she brandishes that firearm at them.
Colby immediately takes off running and hears the gunshot. She thinks Vanessa's right behind her, but she's not.
The bullet hit Vanessa in her back as she was running away, and it came out through her chest, and she just collapsed to the ground.
But if Olivia's disagreement was with Alicia, why did she go after Vanessa?
I remember kind of being shocked that Alicia, the main person that Olivia Moody had the complaint with, was not even there.
Miss Bearden just got drawn into this situation by being a friend.
It could be that Olivia was upset with Vanessa because she was recording the fight. Or maybe she was angry because they were all ganging up on her, and she didn't care who she shot.
When investigators talk to Alicia at her apartment, she verifies Colby's story, but she wasn't there to witness the shooting itself. The other man Colby mentioned is nowhere to be found.
Nobody knew who he really was. It wasn't as if we had a name associated with a person that could go be interviewed immediately after the incident.
The only person detectives haven't spoken to yet is Olivia Moody herself. But before they can do that, they get some terrible news.
Vanessa was rushed to Jefferson Regional Medical Center. And despite the doctor's best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries, and she was pronounced dead at the hospital.
With her being gone, it took from us too. She the heart of the family. Her and Vanessa and my mom, like, if we lose them, we ain't got no family.
Vanessa's death also means the case has officially become a homicide.
Investigators don't know yet if this woman intended to kill Vanessa, but either way, she's looking at a murder charge.
"20-year-old Olivia Moody." But a background check suggests Olivia is the opposite of a cold-blooded killer.
Olivia's life was kind of like an inspirational story.
Our mother was a drug addict, and she was actually raised by her grandmother.
Wow. She always had a hug. When Olivia was just 8 years old, she got featured in Time magazine seeking out for help for her mother and her addiction. It showed her character even just as a young child. Some of her siblings followed under her mother's footsteps, and Olivia was determined not to follow down that same path. She wanted to succeed in life.
Olivia worked hard in school, believing that education was the best way out of her situation.
Olivia was academically gifted. She was a straight-A student all throughout high school, and even with growing up in a rough high school, she still managed to be excelling.
She got teased for it a lot, but it eventually paid off.
She earns a scholarship to come down to the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff to be able to get into a new environment, to also find a place to basically reset her life and start life over again so she can get away from the upbringing that she came up with.
Olivia decided to major in criminal justice with plans to eventually get her law degree.
Olivia spent her whole life seeing tragedies, seeing trauma just in her own city. She watched her mom go through addiction, watching close family members fall into street violence. These are just some of the things that led her to wanting to become an attorney.
She also was doing intern work with one of the circuit courts here in town. And so people thought a lot of Olivia.
She was on the dean's list. She was very intelligent, had a bright future ahead of her.
While in college, she also started her first serious relationship.
Olivia was somewhat of an oddball in Pine Bluff. She was able to find a boyfriend and find love. She was finally happy. She was really finding her way.
Growing up and maybe not having secure relationships with her parents and finding, someone that she could be in love with and she started to feel safe with and started to maybe establish a family of her own.
Olivia was heartbroken when her boyfriend suddenly broke up with her and started dating Alicia, the young woman from the recent fight.
Olivia was in love with her boyfriend, and when Alicia came and basically stole him, that was very devastating for her and upsetting. Love triangles can be really tricky. It often leads to a lot of drama. There's a lot of contention, just jealousy, anger, a lot of fights. It's an environment where there can be a lot of conflict and chaos.
But was it enough to drive an aspiring lawyer to kill someone?
We went to the apartment where the witnesses told us that she lived, knocked on the door. She opened the door, asked her if she was Olivia Moody. She stated that was her. When we told her we was going to have to place her on arrest and take her for questioning, she didn't seem like she was upset at that time. She seemed more like she was relieved. I told her I was going to read her rights before I asked any questions. She said she understood that because she was a student at UAPB and she was a criminal justice major. So I read her rights, and what I found interesting was she told me that the correct charge that you would have for me would be second-degree murder.
When Olivia Moody was arrested by the Paula Police Department, they arrested her for suspicion of committing capital murder. She flat out told the police officer, this isn't capital murder, this is more like second-degree murder. She clearly had an understanding of criminal law, given her education and her internships. And she clearly had a working knowledge of self-defense. From my perspective, she was using that education and using that knowledge to try to set up the best scenario where she could claim self-defense.
Hours after Vanessa Bearden was killed, the primary suspect, Olivia Moody, sits down with investigators to give her side of the story. Olivia insists she didn't mean to kill anyone. She was defending herself against a group of bullies.
Olivia admits that she was upset about her boyfriend and his relationship with Alicia. But according to her, Alicia was the one that wouldn't let it go.
Alicia definitely was cocky about it. She was excited. She wanted to brag. She definitely wanted to rub it in Olivia's face. Constant picking, nagging, to the point where Olivia just had to block her.
To make matters worse, Alicia's apartment was just across the street from Olivia's.
But it was crystal clear that they did not like each other, and a fight was bound to happen when they all live in that small area with all those different complexes.
And on June 26th, the two finally collided.
Olivia decided to go to the corner store down from her apartment complex. There, she was met by Alicia and a group of her friends, and that's when everything started.
The way Olivia tells it, Alicia was the one that jumped her first. Now they get into it, but guess what? Olivia is tougher than anyone gave her credit for.
Once Olivia seemed to be getting the better of Alicia, her friends jumped in the fight. And basically, well, you know, when it's many on one, the many usually win.
The video taken of the fight shows clearly Olivia was outnumbered. There's hair pulling and arms flying, and it was a chaotic scene for sure.
Olivia was actually knocked over into a ditch, and she assumed the fetal position.
Olivia says she was afraid the group of women was going to kill her until her friend arrived to break up the fight. As he pulls her away, Olivia notices Vanessa recording.
She's already upset that all these women are ganging up on her, but then when she saw someone recording it, that took her to a whole nother level.
But her friend stopped her before the fight could escalate any further.
Put Olivia in his car and took her to one of Olivia's friends' house so that she could feel safe somewhere, because these same girls were already harassing her at her place.
He also gave her the gun to protect herself. Olivia claims that at the time, neither of them expected she would have to use it.
Sometime later, Olivia returns back to the apartment, and the girls who had fought her where Olivia lived were gathered not too far from her apartment.
Olivia says she had her friend drop her off at the back entrance so that she could avoid all of them. But as she walked past the breezeway, she heard one of them shout, "Get her."
Olivia says that's when she saw Vanessa coming towards her and pulled out the gun.
Olivia closed her eyes and shot the gun. And that's when Vanessa was hit.
Miss Moody, in her testimony that she gave, she admitted firing the gun, but she also said that she was really just trying to scare them away.
To detectives, it seems more likely that Olivia shot Vanessa because she was still angry at her for recording the fight.
In the digital age, you know, when something happens and it's recorded, it's there and it never goes away. And anybody can have that, can get a copy of that. You never can take that back. So I can imagine Olivia was feeling helpless at that time period, some embarrassment.
She had gone after Vanessa earlier, so it kind of made sense that she would go after her again when Vanessa got back.
Based on the statements gathered so far, police arrest Olivia Moody and take her into custody.
She was charged with murder in the first degree, which is a Class Y felony in the state of Arkansas. Carries with it a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years, up to life imprisonment.
Not everyone believes she's guilty, however. As word of Olivia's arrest begins to spread, many residents rush to support her.
She's a bright, young legal student that's given a lot to the community. A lot of people believed her. And in fact, they saw her as the victim.
Olivia impacted so many people in the community, so much so to when she was arrested, the community got together to raise some money for her to be bonded out. There were fundraisers and fish fries and raffles, all to make sure that she had a good legal team on her side.
But there are just as many supporters for Vanessa Bearden.
They remember Mrs. Bearden's accomplishments in becoming a nurse and the love that everyone said that Mrs. Bearden had for her children.
People in the community also helped raise money for Vanessa's mother because she was left to raise 2 children on her own, all while having terminal cancer.
The town is deeply divided over the case, and prosecutors fear a jury might be as well.
Some felt like it was self-defense. Some felt like it was murder.
On May 12, 2012, Olivia Moody graduates college with a criminal justice degree and a 3.6 GPA. 4 days later, she stands trial for the killing of Vanessa Bearden. The prosecution's case centers around disproving Olivia's claim of self-defense.
Mrs. Moody was just as involved in that provocation and those actions as Alicia was.
The fight has been over for a while before Olivia shoots Vanessa. Her life is not in danger when she comes back with that gun.
We're not talking about a 5-minute reactionary thing that happens here. We're looking at Olivia getting away from the situation, leaving and going away for an hour, and now coming back. Now it's time for retribution from Olivia's perspective.
Olivia Moody. She was trying very clearly to bait those young ladies to come to her on her terms.
Prosecutors argue Olivia used her knowledge of the criminal justice system to lure Vanessa into a situation where she could argue self-defense, ironically helping prove it was a premeditated act. Although Vanessa had a knife on her at the time, her friend Colby testifies that she never used it or threatened Olivia with it.
If the knife had in fact been in her hand, certainly that would be part of the overall circumstances that could have been argued to a jury to produce fear. But in Arkansas, you have to prove that there was no opportunity for Olivia Moody to have avoided the situation or to have retreated from the situation.
Vanessa's injuries also proved that she couldn't have been moving towards Olivia.
She had a single gunshot wound to the back, her back shoulder. She was fleeing from the suspect, and at that point, she was no longer a threat.
Still, with public opinion about Olivia's guilt so evenly divided in the town, prosecutors decide to play it safe.
The prosecution offered to give her a plea bargain. The prosecution offered to reduce the charge against Olivia Moody from first-degree murder to manslaughter, which is a Class D felony, carrying with it a maximum prison sentence of 6 years and/or a fine of $10,000. And she declined.
Olivia seems certain that once the jury hears her side of the story, she'll be acquitted.
In the state of Arkansas, when you plead self-defense, we were going to have her testify as to her state of mind.
The jury here is all about Olivia's background, how she's been bullied on social media, and how these women have ganged up on her. They're arguing when she sees Vanessa waiting for her, she thinks it's gonna happen again.
And we're trying to prove that the circumstances were such that a reasonable person in Olivia's position would have been in fear of serious bodily harm or death had the young ladies who were approaching her engaged her in another assault.
But the jury doesn't seem to be convinced.
Olivia came across to jurors as not being remorseful, especially given her obvious intelligence and education. And I don't think it was helped by her performance on the stand.
She was very matter of fact. She was not upset at all. She did not appear to have any remorse or concern for Vanessa Bearden. She was very snobbish, if not arrogant. Almost of the attitude of, I've told you it was self-defense, how dare you question me?
It really came down to, does the jury believe that it was reasonable and the only option Mrs. Moody had was to defend herself with deadly force?
On May 18th, 2012, the jury returns a verdict. While they don't think the killing was premeditated, they also don't believe it was self-defense. Instead, they find Olivia Moody guilty of second-degree murder. She receives the maximum sentence.
On May 12th, Olivia received her bachelor's degree in honors. And on May 19th, she received 30 years in prison.
The two women involved are fighting over the same man. And that's not a good reason in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, for somebody to die. And I think that also had something to do with the length of the sentence. In the minds of some jurors, when you talk to them, they had an expectation of someone with Olivia's education, training, and intelligence, that she would make different choices, rightly or wrongly.
Olivia Moody has no one to blame for this but herself. She walked through that breezeway with that gun in her hand. She shot Vanessa Bearden as Vanessa Bearden was unarmed and ran away from her. That is no one's fault but Olivia Moody's.
In 2019, Olivia gets some surprising news.
After serving just 7 years of her sentence, Olivia went in front of the parole board, and she was released on September 27th, 2019, which actually was her 29th birthday.
Shootings and homicides, we deal with them quite frequently. This one was a little different because it wasn't drug-related and it wasn't gang-related. It was just a tragedy. 2 young ladies, lives, one lost, families torn apart. It was a situation I feel like that probably could have been avoided.
Even if Olivia claimed that she was being bullied, Vanessa had actually never met her before that day. Hearing Olivia paint herself as a victim was painful for her family, because Vanessa is the one that's not gonna see her kids grow up.
Revenge, that's all it was. She wanted revenge. She came back to a situation that had already de-escalated when she killed her cold blood. They didn't know each other. Vanessa, my auntie, she was just there at the wrong time.
I believe that Olivia Moody had been embarrassed earlier that day. I believe that she thought she had set up a scenario where she could get payback or get revenge and get away with it, and she was wrong. She did a very terrible, terrible thing.
Brunswick, Georgia is a quiet and picturesque town with plenty of old world charm. But it's also a city riddled with corruption and racial division. And in February 2020, the modern-day lynching of a young unarmed black man named Ahmaud Arbery, who was hunted down and killed in broad daylight, will expose a political system that protects its killers at all costs. Ahmaud's murder will also help ignite a worldwide movement for racial justice, the likes of which the world has never seen before. Brunswick is a beautiful port city located halfway between Savannah and Jacksonville, Florida.
There's just nothing like this place. We have the Sibley Bridge. When you go across it at the right time of day, when the floodplain is just right, I mean, it is awe-inspiring. It's just something that to behold the rich beauty of nature.
I can go to St. Simon's or to Jekyll and enjoy just being out there looking at the water, finding a quiet place. But for me, what makes it beautiful is the people here.
Brunswick's storied Black history dates back to the Civil War. Slaves who joined and aided the Union on their march through the South were eventually granted land in return for their service.
That is why Sherman wrote Special Order 15 that designated all of the land from Charleston, South Carolina to St. Johns River, 35 miles inland, belonged to black folk.
Special Order 15 became known as the 40 acres and a mule rule. Thousands of newly freed slaves became landowners, and with them came their knowledge to grow what would become known as the South's white gold. Along with cotton, rice became one of the most important and abundant crops in the region.
The notion is that cotton was king, but rice was queen. And the idea of that happening caused the plantations here to be extremely wealthy situations. One of the people that they talk about that owned slaves was a guy by the name of Pierce Butler. Mr. Butler was really a gambler, and in gambling he lost a lot of money, but he owned more slaves than anybody else east of the Mississippi in this country. So what it did is it caused us as people, when the plantation owners had to depart here, it caused black folk to be in a position of doing what they needed to do for themselves.
Soon, Brunswick had a thriving black economy with one of the busiest ports on the East Coast.
In 1910, the county was majority black. A number of black businesses sprung up here. It was our own little black Wall Street. And we had a number of people that flourished.
But Brunswick's booming economy came with a dark side. Wealthy white industrialists took notice of the powerhouse the city had become and made moves to take the land back from its black residents.
When they saw an opportunity that we were doing well at, and they wanted it, they just took it.
The hotels that was owned by black folk went out of business. The swimming pool that was owned by black folk was covered up in sand.
The new powers that be shifted Brunswick's economy from agriculture and industry to tourism. To survive, African Americans had to take low-paying jobs at the new white-owned resorts that were springing up all around the city.
The pay rate for these positions were kept very low, and so people became more impoverished.
We've lost homes, we've lost businesses. We don't own nothing. The program of how all of this is used in order to bring about an economic devastation in our community is clever, consistent, and it's criminal.
The political power that black residents once had in Brunswick has also disappeared.
That imbalance plays itself out in a lot of different manners, because in politics, you're going to take care of the high taxpayers, right? And to heck with those people who are barely making it.
And in 2020, the murder of a young black man would show the world just how powerful and criminal Brunswick's political connections could be. Around 12 p.m. on February 23, 2020, 25-year-old Ahmaud Aubrey leaves his mother's house in Brunswick to go for a run.
It was a daily routine. He made that a part of his healthy development process with the desire to be a professional athlete. So he just ran across the road into the Satilla Shores.
The neighborhood of Satilla Shores is a beautiful, tree-lined, older neighborhood, a lot of beautiful houses. I would call it your standard middle-class 1 to 2 story houses. Some of them have garages, some of them have pools, and just a nice neighborhood. One of the Glenn County police officers and his wife lived in that particular neighborhood. You had a lot of older people who had lived there a number of years. So you had a number of retirees who lived there, but you also had new families living there.
You have residents of varying incomes there, but mostly middle-class homes. It's very quiet. It also sits just across the highway from the Fancy Bluff neighborhood, which is where Ahmaud Arbery grew up in and lived.
Ahmaud would never make it out of Satilla Shores. An hour later, just after 1 p.m., Brunswick police respond to shots fired in the area.
We have our first responding officer who hears the shots. He heads down Satilla Shore and he pulls up. And what he's confronted with is Mr. Arbery lying in a pool of blood in the middle of Holmes Drive.
It's gonna be a black male, middle of the roadway.
There are 2 other men standing there. At this point in time, this officer is all alone. He has no idea what has transpired. He has no idea who is armed and who isn't armed, and who's a friend and who's not a friend. Meaning, are these people all together? He doesn't know. He also is not medically trained. So the best he can do is call this in.
No.
There was absolutely nothing EMS, the fire truck, or a hospital could have done for Mr. Arbery due to the nature of his wounds and the extensive blood loss that he had suffered.
It will be months before the truth of what happened comes out. And when it does, Ahmaud's name will become a rallying cry for social justice. Ahmaud Arbery was born in Brunswick, Georgia, the youngest child of Wanda Cooper Jones and Marcus Arbery Sr.
He probably didn't necessarily live the life that people stereotype Black people into, which is poor, poverty, terrible upbringing. He came from a loving and supportive home.
They were always good people. They were folk that you would consider your friend, that you could trust.
Oh, I love this family. He loved this family dearly. His mom, that was his queen. Like, that was his queen, I would catch rides with them. And I used to be in the back seat. He was in the front. I used to kind of just observe how he was with his mother. And like, they had fun times. They had serious times. And, but they were always like, tight. He loved his mom dearly. And his family, really, because he had cousins that he hadn't met or talked to in a certain amount of time that, once he rekindled that relationship with them, they became tight. So it was kind of just like that, just family. Like, once he found out that's my family right there, it was just a different type of energy he gave you. It kind of like, I don't know, just kind of become closer with you. And so he just kind of that type of person. Like, if you family, you family. I don't care when I met you, things like that. I'm gonna take you in like me. Like, I'm gonna welcome you in with open arms. Like, you just that type of person.
Growing up, Ahmaud was well loved by everyone who knew him.
He would give you literally the shirt off his back, if he felt like you needed it.
He was also a talented athlete. Ahmaud started playing football when he was only 5 years old and went on to play linebacker for his high school team.
Every Black kid growing up, in urban areas, dreams are like, okay, I'm gonna make it in sports. And, Ahmaud talked about, going to the NFL one day.
There are a few athletes that have come out of Brunswick, and Ahmaud wanted to be one of them.
Those dreams never materialized, but Ahmaud continued to stay fit while going to technical college to become an electrician.
He was very active in maintaining his well-being, his mental health, and the way he did that was by running.
I kind of felt like he had this idea of like, you gotta be in shape to chase your dream. He definitely wanted a wife and kids, a family, big house and whatnot. He would just, speak about becoming an electrician, owning his own business, passing it on to his kids and things like that.
But now, Ahmaud's once promising future has died with him. Police inform Ahmaud's family that he was killed while committing a burglary in Satilla Shores.
got a text, you know what I'm saying? My closest friend just died in some burglary, some weird burglary. It just didn't make sense to me. I went in the bathroom, just kind of cried my eyes out. Felt like a part of me died when he died.
Because of social media, news of Ahmaud's death sweeps through the rest of Brunswick within minutes.
About 1:30, that notification popped up on my phone because people talk fast around here, right? And that's the narrative. Someone broke in a house, homeowner, shot.
There was this narrative that was kind of already being created about his character, and it was treated like an open and shut case.
Ahmaud's death and the truth behind it will ignite a furious fight for justice and expose the dark truth about just how divided a city can be.
We had been calling for a federal investigation in the corruption of this city for years.
The interweb of connectivity speaks to something far more nefarious and far more entrenched that says, we don't do something, this ain't gonna be the only one.
From its Victorian-era historic district to the beautiful surrounding islands, Brunswick, Georgia attracts tourists year-round. But amidst the wealth and splendor, there are areas still reeling from decades of poverty.
Even if you walk a few blocks outside of downtown, you have boarded up homes, you have some condemned properties. So there's still a lot of progress left to be made in the city.
25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was hoping to be a part of that progress. Instead, he's been shot to death in a neighborhood near his mother's house.
And how'd you say you got that blood on you? He had his arm.
The two men responsible are 64-year-old retired investigator Gregory McMichael and his son, 34-year-old Travis McMichael. They are still on the scene when police arrive, along with their neighbor, William Roddy Bryan.
The story they gave was get Ahmaud. He had been breaking into houses in the neighborhood, and they had tried to get him to stop. Because they were going to do a citizen's arrest, but they couldn't get him to stop. Greg, he's retired, chief investigator, so assuming he knew some type of law.
According to the McMichaels, there had been several recent break-ins in the area. So when they saw Ahmaud running through the neighborhood, they decided to chase after him.
I'm reposting some boat cases in the back of my truck. I look up, this guy comes hauling ass down the street. I'm talking about in a dead run. He's not jogging. So I haul ass back in the house and said, Travis, the guy's running down the street. Let's go. So I haul ass into my bedroom, get my 357 Magnum. Glen County PD issue, by the way, that I told you years ago. Travis grabs his shotgun, because we don't know if this guy's armed.
They hop in their car. They don't call 911 still. They chase him. They chase him past William Bryan's home, who calls out, y'all got him. William Bryan hops in his truck, proceeds to follow.
He's running down an damn road, and in the meantime, we're hollering, stop, we want to talk to you.
The men say they finally caught up to Ahmaud and confronted him.
And then Travis jumps out with the shotgun, and he runs up here, and the guy, at some point, the guy more or less attacks him, runs towards him, and they get in a fight over the damn shotgun.
He claimed Ahmaud attacked him first.
During the struggle, Travis shoots Ahmaud 3 times.
They never denied that they shot him. Travis never denied that he shot him.
Just breathe, okay?
When he's questioned at the scene, Travis claims he'd seen Ahmaud lurking around a neighbor's property a few times over the past few months.
He was first on the property, I think about October 25th. He's there again November, and then there again, I think, December. We don't really know that he's there again until February. So he was there about 4 times before.
The McMichaels say one particular incident in October of 2019 had them on high alert.
Travis said he saw Ahmaud that day, and Ahmaud flashed a weapon at him.
He went and told his dad. His dad got up, and Diego, the neighborhood watch guy, I guess is what they called themselves, and they tried to clear the house. They called out Glenn County PD, but they didn't come across Ahmaud that day.
Officers obtained multiple videos that show Ahmaud at the property at least 4 times prior, including the video from the day of the shooting.
Mr. Arbery just walks into the camera view, stands in front of the house. It's a bright, beautiful, sunshiny day. It's a little bit before 1 o'clock, and he's wandering around. He looked around the house, didn't touch anything, didn't steal anything, didn't take anything, didn't vandalize anything.
None of the videos, including the one from the day of the shooting, ever show Ahmaud with a weapon. Still, based on the initial investigation, no charges are filed against the 3 men involved. Ahmaud's friends and family are outraged.
The early reporting was just a press release sent from Glenn County Police to local stations that basically said that these men shot and killed someone in self-defense. There wasn't anything more to it than that.
Ahmaud's supporters demand justice. But by the next day, it becomes clear they aren't likely to get it.
Greg McMichael had previously been Jackie Johnson's chief investigator at the district attorney's office. At that point in time, of course, the law enforcement officers called over to the district attorney's office seeking guidance, which is a total normal practice. She had one of her assistant district attorneys respond that they were going to have to recuse themselves off that particular case.
And she'd asked a nearby district attorney, George Barnhill, to actually look at this case and make a recommendation. He recommended to Jackie Johnson that there be no charges filed. Again, open and shut. And so there was really no investigation.
On February 29th, Ahmaud is laid to rest. His funeral becomes a rallying cry for answers.
Being at that funeral, seeing my brother in the casket like that, really, that's when it hit me. That he's gone forever. For sure, I want answers because it just, none of it just made sense. The more truth we found out, it became worse and worse.
Georgia's citizens' arrest laws date back to the 1800s. Many believe they have racist roots that once allowed slave patrols and lynch mobs to take the law into their own hands. Was Ahmaud's death proof that history has an unfortunate way of repeating?
Why were you chasing him to effect the citizen's arrest? What was the crime? When did the crime occur? It doesn't work like that. You were afraid of a black man. You were afraid of the color of his skin. You felt, because of your upbringing, that he was a threat to you and your well-being. He wasn't. You did it out of fear of what it is you thought to be true, and it's not right. And a lot of people have a tendency to operate off that. When you're ignorant of stuff, that's how you move. You're afraid of it. You're resistant to it. You'll go against it. You don't want to get to know it. But the more you're informed about something, then the easier it is to maneuver. In this particular situation, no, you were afraid of him. He was black, and that's not what you're accustomed to seeing in that neighborhood. It caught you off guard. Saw a black man running down in the neighborhood. Yeah, you saw him on camera going into a new development. He didn't take anything. At no point in time you saw on that camera he took anything. He always came in there empty-handed and left empty-handed.
Glenn County, where Brunswick is located, has a diverse population. But Satilla Shores, the community where Ahmaud Arbery was shot, is predominantly white.
It sits near some waterfront properties just off of I-17, which is a major thoroughfare in Glenn County. And it's not gated. I think a lot of people would be under the impression that it is, but it's not a gated community. It is a public street that anyone is free to run through.
In the wake of Ahmaud's death, some in the community came out in support of the McMichaels.
From the white community's standpoint, there was no malice or hatred in their heart. They were doing it to protect the neighborhood.
We need more guys like him. You know, good guy with a gun. You know, that's the national narrative, right?
Even though his family and friends are told Ahmaud was killed while committing a burglary, they aren't buying the narrative. At the front of the fight for truth is Ahmaud's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones.
She was very crucial. I believe that her, along with some of his friends, led a social media campaign called I Run With Maud that was used to kind of raise money in his honor, but also to hopefully lead to a fuller investigation.
She was trying to get in touch with Barnhill, the DA in Waycross, and he would not even return her calls.
As she digs into Ahmaud's case, his mother notices holes in the story, starting with the 911 call made by Greg McMichael just moments before Ahmaud was shot and killed.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street.
Where at Satilla Shores?
That was what he said his emergency was. I'm out here in Satilla Shores, and there's a black man running down the street.
A review of the officer's body cam footage also reveals how informally they treated the crime scene and their questioning of the McMichaels.
Hey, Greg.
How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Yeah.
You're doing this. I do know Greg.
How you doing? I know y'all will take him down.
Yeah, he's going to have the interview.
Yeah. Y'all don't put him in cuffs, are you?
No. Why would he be in cuffs?
There's a level of comfort there, speaking with the McMichaels and William Bryan as if they were old friends.
If I could have got a shot at the guy, I shot him myself.
They were also allowed to go home, change, and then come to the police station to be interviewed. There was no immediacy to actually learn what had happened prior to Ahmaud being killed.
The autopsy report undermines their claim of self-defense as well.
He'd been shot in the arm and had also been shot in the chest with the first shotgun blast. That was consistent with him trying to do this, push that shotgun away.
The first shot is to tell, when it's right here, what happened to make you shoot him right in his chest? What happened for you to shoot an unarmed man point blank in his chest with a shotgun?
Greg McMichael's connection to his former employer, District Attorney Jackie Johnson, also becomes a concern in the fight for justice.
Greg McMichael revealed to the Glenn County police officers who had responded who he was, a retired law enforcement officer who had previously been Jackie Johnson's chief investigator at the district attorney's office.
I was chief investigator with the DA's office for 23 years.
Johnson had recused herself from the case early on, but the lack of charges against her former employee and his son still raised questions about preferential treatment.
She sent it to somebody that she knew would still cover them, protect them, so she knew exactly what she was doing.
District Attorney George Barnhill in neighboring Waycross, Georgia, took over the case, but he too declined to file charges.
When he was officially assigned the case, he'd written a 2-page memo essentially saying that these men were in the right and that they were justified in killing Ahmaud Arbery.
What's the story with why it was sent to George Barnhill? Oh my golly. His son works in Jackie Johnson's office, which is why he was motivated to write a diatribe of inhumanity in his assessment of the case, because he's connected as well.
That caused George Barnhill to have to recuse himself.
The more we learned, the more we figured out there was a lot of lies being told. That there were nefarious objectives being played out that were not just to protect the people who committed the crime, protect those political entities, right, that had gotten their hands dirty because that's a member of the club, right?
The lack of charges by anyone handling the case created more questions than answers for many in Brunswick.
We all had to go through this wondering if he was trying to steal something, because that's what they're telling us. We didn't know him to be a thief or anything like that. It was out of character for him. And so that's what we had to try to deal with in our minds and hearts, that were at war with each other.
Then, in May of 2020, a new video of the shooting changes everything.
When you look at the video, what popped up was the black guys running. 2 white men shoot him in the middle of the street. It was hard to watch. It was just as horrific as George Floyd was.
More than 2 months have passed since Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and his loved ones are still trying to get Brunswick police to investigate. Then on May 5th, a cell phone video of the shooting appears on the internet. The video was taken by the McMichael's neighbor, William Roddy Bryan.
Greg McMichael came to the hardware store where Mr. Bryan was working, fixing small engines, and asked for the phone because the video was still on his cell phone. Greg McMichael took that cell phone, went to his attorney's location, had the video taken off the cell phone, and the attorney and Greg McMichael then released that cell phone video to the public.
These men thought it would exonerate them and show that they were innocent in all of this, when really it showed that they killed Ahmaud Arbery.
What you see on that video is Mr. Bryan videotaping it, Mr. Arbery running. The McMichaels chase Mr. Arbery down to the end of the street and falsely imprison him at that point, cutting him off. He turns around to run back. And it's at that point that Mr. Bryan pulls out of his driveway and actually attempts to hit Mr. Arbery and runs him off the road into the ditch across the street. Mr. Arbery keeps running.
If 2 men were chasing me with guns, yelling obscenities to me, I probably wouldn't stop either.
Mr. Bryan then attempts to hit him not once, not twice, but 3 more times with his pickup truck, thus committing aggravated assault. Mr. Arbery is now trapped between the 2 pickup trucks on Holmes Drive. He has no cell phone. He can't even call for help. As Mr. Bryan pursues him and forces him closer to the white pickup truck, Travis McMichael gets out, and Travis McMichael pulls out his 12-gauge shotgun. There's absolutely no reason to point the shotgun at Mr. Arbery, but he does.
You definitely see Travis McMichael fire 3 shots that tell a different story than what was initially portrayed. It does not show that Ahmaud Arbery was the aggressor, and it definitely doesn't show that the men acted in self-defense.
Within hours, the video goes viral.
When it was released, you know, people had already called this a modern-day lynching, and they already felt like, you know, this was racist behavior on the part of the defendants.
I was torn to pieces. It was just like, he really was just hunted down, you know, like an animal.
I saw Emmett Till, and I saw it in modern day time. And like I said, I would never imagine actually bearing witness to anything like that in my lifetime. Was I angry about it? Oh, most definitely.
That day, hundreds of people take to the streets demanding justice.
The black community and the white community here really rose up in disgust by these guys.
It changed the narrative that Ahmaud was this brazen criminal who needed to be stopped.
Young people hit the street. The people who knew him, who went to school with him, who taught him in school, the people who was close to him. When they went out there in that community, all hell broke loose and everything changed.
It infuriates you, but it also empowers you. That you have to fight as hard as he did.
Due in part to the COVID-19 pandemic, the case also draws global attention.
Shutdowns were still happening. We were forced to pay attention to what was going on, even if it wasn't in our own neighborhood. And that, I believe, is what in particular drew larger support.
Like a wildfire, when that video dropped and hit social media, everyone saw it, not just Glenn County anymore. It made its way across the world to Africa. Everyone saw that video. So for what it did do, it got everybody watching. And it started holding people accountable.
Ahmaud's murder becomes linked to dozens of other high-profile cases, including Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, and Trayvon Martin.
Well, you got to understand that we as a people, we took a lot of losses over the years, and they were unnecessary losses. In this particular situation, the law enforcement entity failed us severely because you know that a blind eye was kind of turned to it. And that was the unfortunate part about it.
Facing massive pressure from both the public and the media, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp refers the case to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
The GBI hits the ground May 6th, May 7th. They are canvassing the neighborhoods, all neighborhoods, Royal Oaks, Satilla Shores, the Fancy Bluff neighborhood. They're talking to any and everyone, all the people in the neighborhood who had video. They're going over all of the evidence.
For Ahmaud's loved ones, it's a vindication of their efforts to see justice done. But they also know there is still a long way to go. Viral videos have become a major contributor to the resolution of controversial cases. Ahmaud's is no exception.
If the video wasn't there, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would have never heard of Ahmaud Arbery. We would have never known what happened. The world would have never known. And Georgia would have moved on as if nothing ever happened. And to me, that's scary.
3 days after the video of Ahmaud's death is made public, residents of Brunswick gather for a show of solidarity on what would have been his 26th birthday. They remember him for who he was and the difference he wanted to make in this world.
He was working toward his own goals to bettering himself, to either improve himself within his community or perhaps even move outside of Brunswick and make a name for himself there. Unfortunately, we'll never know.
He did nothing to deserve what he got. We have to realize in this world, I mean, being a black man, especially right now, this case, it brought it full circle for us. You can be accused of stuff you didn't do just because of how you look.
Amidst public outcry, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reviews the video evidence and statements made to police.
Just based on a review of the evidence in about 48 hours, Special Agent Dial is able to determine that warrants for the arrest of Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael are appropriate, and they are arrested.
The governor assigns prosecution of the case to the Cobb County District Attorney's Office in Marietta.
We were able to hit the ground running in concert with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to really work with them in tandem on the investigation and going forward with the prosecution.
Cobb County prosecutors charged the McMichaels with suspicion of felony murder and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. The move finally restores a bit of faith among Ahmaud supporters.
At the end of the day, we wanted answers and we wanted justice. We wanted change.
Pulled out of my driveway, was going to try to block you.
William Roddy Bryan, the man who made the video of Ahmaud's killing, had initially avoided charges like the McMichaels. But Cobb County prosecutors were determined to make sure he was brought to justice as well.
Mr. Bryan said, I tried to run him off the road this time, then I tried to hit him this time.
I mean, he actually pulled your handle? I wouldn't be surprised if that's his warrants right there. Okay. He was trying to get the handle.
We actually had Mr. Arbery's palm print on the side of this car. He'd gotten that close to Mr. Arbery that Mr. Arbery had to probably, in our opinion, push away from the car to keep from being hit. The evidence of the case showed that he was acting as a party to the crime.
On May 21st, the DA's office decides to charge Brian as well.
These men were not law enforcement, which made this case entirely different. And I think is what made it even more troublesome is that traditionally we had seen officers being the aggressors in these cases. And here there was such great lengths to protect those who were only law enforcement adjacent, which only reinforced this idea of a good old boy system.
4 days later, on May 25th, the video of George Floyd's murder adds more fuel to the fire.
I can't breathe my face. Just get up.
His case and Ahmaud's become part of a national groundswell for social justice, with protests in every major city.
When I'm on social media and I see people marching in Minneapolis carrying signs that say justice for Ahmaud, we're in something a lot bigger than ourselves. That video expanded the community exponentially to a global call. And that window between the release of the video, the death of George Floyd, and the death of Breonna Taylor was transformative for a movement that had been moving since 2015.
The Cobb County DA's office impanels a grand jury and gets indictments against all three men.
The indictment charged all three of the defendants with malice murder, which basically means you just don't care about the consequences of what you're doing to this other person.
This was more than just a murder case or a hate crime. This was important to our community. This was important to our state. This was important to our nation, that we not just get to the root of all of these issues, but start to resolve some of the darkness that we found when we pulled the covers back.
Even with the indictments, the case is far from over. It will be up to a nearly all-white jury to determine if a crime was committed at all.
The defendants are white, and so most of the jury looks just like the defendants. Will this play in their favor? Will this render a not guilty verdict?
I'm expecting the worst.
In 2021, a trial date is set for Greg McMichael, Travis McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan. Jury selection begins in November and takes nearly 3 weeks.
It was a tough process. There were a lot of jurors who really felt uncomfortable. A lot of them, some knew the Arbery family, so if you didn't know the Arbery family, then you probably knew the McMichaels.
Courthouse security becomes another major concern.
We had the first black female district attorney in Cobb County at the time we got appointed the case. So she had her own set of security issues we had to worry about before we even got the case. And it only escalated things once we got it. Then we ended up getting the first black male district attorney in the county to win election. So the security threat went even higher.
The threats would come via email, some on social media. We're preparing for a possible war. But at one point, we got some intel that a group of extremists were going to make their way down to South Georgia. And we were just getting ready for it. We were going to fight. We were going to fight. It was a big deal.
Inside the courtroom, however, the focus is on the evidence.
Linda Dunikoski and her team of prosecutors really laid that out, defining that in this particular instance, the McMichaels and William Bryan were the aggressor, that they initiated this, not Ahmaud Arbery, even if he had stolen something from the property, which, again, he did not.
The video did allow the jury to see exactly what took place in the moments before Mr. Arbery was murdered. We have Travis McMichael pointing a shotgun at the chest of Mr. Arbery, an unarmed jogger who has nothing in his hands. He's wearing a t-shirt and some cargo shorts. Never pulls a weapon out, never does anything. So for us, we knew just looking at this, you're the one with the shotgun, and then you shot somebody. you're not in imminent fear of receiving serious bodily injury or death, you don't get to claim self-defense.
What happened to Ahmaud was because he was black. Nothing more, nothing less.
The defense insists the case isn't about race, but about law-abiding citizens trying to prevent crime in their neighborhood.
One of the ways the defense tried to cast doubt on Ahmaud Arbery was just showing the repeated instances in which Ahmaud Arbery had been at the property that we've seen on video.
Obviously, the citizen's arrest narrative came into play once their attorneys got a hold of the case.
Travis McMichael takes the stand to tell the jury what happened from his perspective.
He testified that Ahmaud Arbery had grabbed his gun, and that's what led him to shoot. He did not necessarily say or try and vigorously paint Ahmaud Arbery as like this brazen criminal, but he more so took the behavior of, I acted in fear because a crime had been committed against me and I had been the victim of crime before.
Were they, in fact, effectuating a citizen's arrest? The state's position was they were not. None of them ever mentioned that they were trying to effectuate a citizen's arrest. None of them said they were trying to arrest him. None of them actually used any of those words.
You did nothing wrong. You chose to do it because of what you feared. You feared him. And you feared him because he was black. Everybody saw it for what it was.
On November 24th, the jury returns its verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty.
They found Greg and Travis McMichael guilty of all the charges in the indictment. However, they found Mr. Bryan not guilty of the malice murder. They found him guilty of the remaining charges, though, which would be the aggravated assault and felony murder based on his use of his pickup truck to both assault Mr. Arbery and to falsely imprison him. It is an automatic life sentence. And at this point in time, that is what Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael have been sentenced to. Mr. Bryan was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole for his felony murder charge.
On February 22nd, 2022, a separate federal trial also finds the three men guilty of hate crimes.
You hear overwhelming evidence of racial animus on the part of each defendant. And that's when you really see more of how race played a factor.
Ahmaud's killers are behind bars, but for his loved ones and the city of Brunswick, justice is only the beginning.
What are we going to learn from Ahmaud? We've learned currently that racism still exists, prejudice still exists, but how do we move forward? What are we going to do? You can talk all day, but until you put it into action, it means absolutely nothing. It's just a thought.
Ahmaud Arbery's death is definitely a dark cloud, but from that you've seen a great deal of change. And hopefully, and for some residents, they're hopeful that that means improved changes in Brunswick.
Just seeing the impact and hearing the stories that he helped create, it warms my spirit. You know, even though he's not here, Ahmaud always knew it was going to be big. He just didn't know it was going to come at the expense of his life.
Roanoke is nestled in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Where we are in Roanoke, Virginia, I mean, the mountains, the trails, the scenery, it's beautiful. It's breathtaking.
When my husband and I moved here to Roanoke, I felt the art scene was wonderful. The local music scene was wonderful. It's enough of a city, and then you can be out in the country in just about 15 minutes.
Originally known as Big Lick, Roanoke got its name after the N&W Railroad moved their headquarters here in 1882.
The president of the N&W Railway did not want his headquarters in a place called Big Lick. So he asked for a name change.
City officials settled on Roanoke, named for the Roanoke River that flows through town. As railway construction began in the city, workers, many of whom were African American, flooded into Roanoke in search of employment.
African Americans came to the city in order to build a better life for themselves.
But their reception was often met with racism.
So we did have very segregated housing policies that really posited various cultural groups in tightly confined neighborhood sections.
African American residents were confined to the northeast quadrant of Roanoke, where they still managed to build a thriving community.
You get an opportunity for families of African American descent to all be together in a neighborhood, which means that the doctor is living next door to the plumber, so their children and their families were connected.
But in the 1960s, an aggressive government program called Urban Renewal wreaked havoc on Roanoke's black community.
Urban renewal was an effort to eliminate, quote unquote, blighted neighborhoods. Black removal was what it was at the end of the day. People will often ask, well, what happened to the 2,000 families that got displaced? Well, the answer then was the creation of federally subsidized housing projects.
These housing projects ultimately became hotbeds of criminal activity.
There was not a lot of economic mobility in federal housing projects, and so these did become pockets of criminal activity, drug activity, because they were economically depressed.
Roanoke became a town divided. Affluent residents and tourists experienced a picturesque paradise, while others just a few blocks away live a life of poverty and struggle.
Those invisible lines exist here in Roanoke because if your basic needs, food, shelter, employment, those things are not being met, then going hiking is not on your radar.
But in 2017, the brutal murders of two promising and beloved young men will expose the cracks in Roanoke's pristine facade, forcing residents to finally face the truth about their charming tourist town. On the early morning of June 15, 2017, 911 dispatchers received reports of gunfire outside a Roanoke apartment complex.
She had multiple 911 calls coming in for people shooting.
In particular, one neighbor, the initial volley of shots actually went through their window and into a wall above where their bed was while they were sleeping.
They're hearing gunshots, repeated gunshots, and they don't know what to do.
Officers rushed to the area.
So the apartment complex was located up off of Tuckawanna Circle, which is in northwest Roanoke.
When officers arrive at the complex, there's no sign of the gunman. Instead, they find a young black male clinging to life.
He obviously had been shot. They were attending to him, trying to get rescue units on scene as soon as possible.
The victim is immediately rushed to the ER.
It's chaos. When I get there, we got to start working this scene and canvassing and finding out who knew what, so we could start piecing this together. Officers were marking off everything. The next thing I did was I went to the hospital. I went into the ER. The surgeon's trying to save the young male, so his chest was cracked. He was laying wide open where they were trying to stop the bleeding and create a heartbeat.
Tragically, surgeons are unable to save the young man.
He was deceased on the operating table. It's a shame. It's a shame to see somebody like that.
So now it was evident that we had a homicide on our hands.
Well, I actually could see the bullet holes, and he had been struck multiple times. At least one of those bullets was recovered from his body.
The victim isn't carrying a phone or ID, but because he appears to be of high school age, Detective Dillon releases the victim's picture to area school resource officers.
It was probably 30 minutes to an hour later before I knew who the deceased was.
A resource officer from nearby Patrick Henry High School texts Detective Dillon. He recognizes the victim as 17-year-old Nicholas Lee. a recent Patrick Henry graduate.
The officer, he was a real good kid, man. I liked him. He was an earnest kid. Like, you could tell that he was just very likable.
Detective Dillon returns to the crime scene, where investigators are trying to make sense of what transpired that night.
When I get there, I realized what we had was a very wide crime scene. There was a different area where the shells were found, where a bullet was found, and then a different area where the body was found. The size of the scene was probably 100 yards by 50 yards. And so now I've got a football field that I'm working with.
Evidence found at the scene suggests the first shots were fired from the parking lot of an adjacent apartment building.
We found multiple .380 shell casings kind of scattered in that initial area where the volley of shots took place.
From there, it appears that Nicholas ran for his life.
You could look at the holes on the apartment and they were going from left to right as shots would be ringing out. And it looked like somebody was shooting at somebody running.
We don't know exactly when, at what point during this chase, the first round hits Nicholas, but we do know that there was a round that hit Nicholas. We have witnesses as he's running to the apartment that note seeing a young individual that we find to be Nicholas is kind of holding his side, and he's running away from two other individuals.
Another witness says she saw Nicholas in his final moments.
They heard clawing at their window. When they pulled the curtains back and looked, they saw what they described as a young black male attempting to claw at the window to get in.
So they saw him trying to get into their window to get away from the people that were trying to kill him.
Right beside that window, probably about 6 feet approximately, is where he ultimately caught up with Nicholas. The two assailants shot him twice in the back and then fled the scene. And very shortly thereafter, Nicholas crawled into a recessed landing outside an apartment, and that's where police were able to locate him.
But who would want to harm 17-year-old Nicholas Lee, and why?
There's an intentionality with the method in which Nicholas was shot and killed. For someone of that age to be gunned down in such an impersonal manner, to be right up close and to finish him off in that way, that was certainly alarming.
Near the scene, detectives find something they hope will help them answer that question: a discarded cell phone.
You've got shell casings probably 50 yards away in one corner. You've got a body found 60 yards away, and then you've got 30 yards north of that, a phone found over a fence underneath a bush. And you're like, man, is this even related, or somebody just dropped a phone?
Detectives can't open the phone without a search warrant. While they wait for a judge to sign off on their request, investigators drive to the Lee family's residence.
Thursday morning, 2 o'clock, knock on the door. Look out the door, and there's a police officer and a guy in civilian clothes.
So it was me and another detective who went out to make notification, and I have done it many a time, but you know, it's always tough.
I'm glad he didn't pull any punches. He just flat out come in and said, "I have bad news. They can tell you, but your son is dead." It's hard to digest, hard to take from, "Are you sure it's Nicholas? Are you sure?" And how? Why? What happened? Where was he? What was he doing? All those questions coming to you, and that's
shaken. And 17-year-old Nicholas Lee dead.
For someone to chase the victim for a prolonged duration and then finish that victim with multiple shots, that tells me that there's a little more going on than just a random act of violence. They had a need or a want to kill that individual, and they saw it through.
Nicholas's family is just learning the tragic news.
It was a rough hour there. All those stages of grief, they all happen at the same time. One right after the other. Denial, anger, why? What can I do? What could I have done wrong? Guilt, all that kind of stuff.
We hugged, we cried, and we sat in silence. We didn't know what to do. 1 week, he would have been 18.
He radiated joy. He completed our family that we didn't even know was missing before him. But once he was there, we knew we were complete.
Nicholas was born on June 22nd, 1999 in Texas.
Where he came from his birth family, it was horrible and tragic from the get-go.
His biological mother was drinking and taking cocaine. So Nicholas was born alcohol fetal and cocaine addicted at 29 weeks old. Yeah, he had a rough start.
Nicholas was put into foster care as an infant and was then placed with the Lee family. He thrived in his new environment.
He got happier and happier. He grew, he gained weight, his little face filled out. Then we became mommy and daddy, and that's what he called us. So he was ours.
By the age of 3, Nicholas was officially adopted by the Lee family. Throughout his life, he continued to be the center of attention in his forever home.
He was special. I don't know what it was, but it was magical with him. He was the light and joy. He would light up the room.
I considered him as my brother. Every time I wanted something, he would be there. If I needed somebody to talk to, he would be there. Telling me, don't do this, don't hang with these people, hang with those people instead.
In 2015, the Lees moved to Roanoke to be closer to their older daughter, Brandy.
I begged them, Mom and Dad, come here to Roanoke, come live here with me. And so they ultimately decided to move here in retirement and let Nicholas finish high school here.
For the Lee family, it was a happy reunion. Tucked in a quiet corner of Southwest Virginia, Roanoke felt like a safer community from the one they had left behind.
They were living in South Carolina at the time, and they weren't really happy with the violence that was in their city. There were gangs there.
Nicholas's parents enrolled their son at Patrick Henry High School.
I chose the school. It was so nice looking from the outside, new, it had a good reputation. So I said, yeah, this is going to be a good fit for him.
By June of 2017, Nicholas had graduated high school and a bright future lay ahead.
He graduated, and it was the happiest day of his life. It seemed like he was just tickled pink.
Nicholas and I had lots of conversations about the future. Nicholas was really talented. He was talented in the arts. He was a great artist, but Nicholas really shined in his music. He always had a dream of just doing music.
But just 2 weeks after graduation, he's been brutally gunned down. Detectives asked the Lees if Nicholas had been dealing with any problems.
We came to find out that Nicholas had struggled with his identity.
Nicholas struggled with being black, raised in a white family. But he also struggled some with the move and with fitting in. He just couldn't exactly find where he fit sometimes.
Well, I met Nicholas in the African American culture class. Nicholas wanted to find something of his culture, wanted to explore more of the African American culture.
They say an incident at Nicholas's new school caused a seismic shift in his personality and had made him feel even more like he didn't belong.
Nicholas saw a gun at school, and he came and asked us about it. And then we said, well, Nicholas, you need to say something, see something, say something. So he did that, and it went downhill from there.
That's not a label you want as a new kid in a high school, is a snitch. And once that was placed on him, I really feel that he needed to fit in somewhere, somehow.
After that, his family started noticing changes in him.
He started skipping school, smoking weed. He would sneak out of the house. It was stressful.
Nicholas wouldn't talk to me anymore. He wouldn't tell me about his day at school, almost as if he wasn't my son anymore.
Posts on social media showed Nicholas spending time with a new and dangerous crowd.
On Facebook and on Instagram, him and his friends would take these pictures of themselves holding guns or doing what they weren't supposed to be doing. That was a red flag. That Nicholas was hanging out with kids that were not headed in the right direction.
Then, his parents say Nicholas's life went completely off the rails.
He come home one day, he said, Mom, someone just shot at me. And I thought, you just talking crap. He says, no, someone really shot at me. And he was beat up a couple times. He would come home with bruises, so I know he was fighting at school.
The Lees had even started to wonder if Nicholas joined a gang.
He would want to wear a particular color, or he would want to put a particular bandana in his hair.
I said, what are you doing? What is all this? This is a gang. He says, no, it's not, Mama. They're just friends. It's like a club, he would tell me.
In desperation, the Lees turned to school administrators and local authorities for help.
But I asked the principal, we sat like this across from each other, and I eyeballed eyeball. I said, is there a gang activity at your school? Because here's what we're seeing. He said, no, it's just street stuff. That's nothing to worry about.
He said, no, there's no gangs in this school. It's just boys being boys. Talk to the sheriff. No gangs here. Even the mayor. There's no gangs in this city. So I didn't know where to go to get help.
I wish they would have gone to an officer in their neighborhood, a regular officer or a regular detective, and they would have probably gotten a different story.
They were telling us there was no gangs, and we were naive enough to believe them. I didn't comprehend what was going on until later.
Has long seemed unthinkable.
Gangs happened in bigger cities, not here on Main Street, USA.
But this misconception has led city officials to downplay a growing problem.
There really was this kind of pushback by folks in Roanoke, and I would include myself in that when I began to first hear about gangs, organized gangs. Well, no, that can't be true. We don't have gangs coming into Roanoke. Yeah, we might have some youth criminal activity, but everybody has that. And so there was this really kind of resistance to that. This doesn't happen in Roanoke. Well, unfortunately it does.
As news of Nicholas Lee's murder hits the local media, residents of Roanoke are left shaken.
And I was watching TV, broadcast news, and they came on, with Nicholas's name. And I didn't have any words. I couldn't cry because it was nothing I could do now. Nicholas was gone.
Eager to aid the investigation, the Lee family opens their home to police.
And they asked to see his computer and those kind of things, so for clues. After about an hour, once we were able to function again and talk, we let him go into his room without a search warrant.
Investigators study Nicholas's online activity and search history, finding a wealth of information.
That footprint led to another footprint, led to another footprint. It wasn't just his footprint, it was the trail.
Detectives look at the same photos that had alarmed the Lees.
There was pictures of him with guns flashing around.
Unlike city officials who wrote off the photos as boys being boys, homicide detectives immediately suspect gang involvement. When they dig into Nicholas's Facebook messages, they find further evidence.
When we reviewed the Facebook messages, someone named Sean Garant was messaging him about missing a meeting for the gang. There was even one message between himself and Garant where Nicholas needed a ride to a gang meeting that Sean Garant had established. So Nicholas said, okay, I'm going to get my mom to bring me. And Garant responded, you can't bring your mom to the gang meeting. And I think that message really showed us how naive Nicholas was.
Investigators used Nicholas's social media to identify a network of potential gang members.
So, once we got all those names together, we had to start researching them. We're looking at Chauncey Levacy, Trayvon Casey, Monte Mack, and Sean Garant. What's their role?
Detectives soon learned that Sean Garant has a dark past.
He stomped a guy to death when he was 16. And I think he served 8 years in prison for that.
During his time in prison, Garant became affiliated with a gang called the Rollin' 30s.
In my heart, I believe that while he was in jail, he learned how to be a better gang member. He made better ties. He made everything that he needed to do to come out and create harm to our community.
After Sean was released from prison, he relocated to the Lansdowne housing projects in Roanoke.
He brought that knowledge of that criminal organization with him, brought the contacts he had made. So once he was here, he was able to establish a foothold in the Lansdowne neighborhood. Sean Garant wanted to take over as the most well-known, the largest, and the most criminally violent gang in Roanoke.
Because Roanoke was so often hyper-focused on presenting a pretty facade for tourism dollars, Sean was able to operate largely under the radar in Lansdowne, a neighborhood that received little of the city's attention. He recruited gang members, including DeMonte Mack and Trayvon Casey, before turning his attention to local high schools.
They were in the high schools, and they had infiltrated in there, I believe, to get a youthful force that they didn't necessarily care that much about, that were disposable, and they could do the dirty work and keep the finances rolling for the gang.
It wasn't unique to just Nicholas in the sense that they were recruiting these high school kids that were searching for a sense of belonging.
They were strategic in who they targeted because they're impressionable, vulnerable individuals I know who are angry at the world, angry at their life, whatever the case may be. You lure them in by pretending that you care.
But if Nicholas had been recruited into a gang, why were the Lees told otherwise?
It could have just been like proximity. Roanoke is a different place after dark for some areas and some neighborhoods. So if you're not close to it after dark, then you wouldn't see it at all. And it may not be for your culture to see it.
There's a lot of people in Roanoke that are clueless of any of the criminal activity.
But the Lee family can't help but feel they were deliberately misled by authorities.
I believe that they knew there were gangs. I believe they bald-faced lied to me and my family because gangs are bad for business.
Yes, all about the money. Roanoke's a tourist place because of the hiking and the bicycling and all that. And if we got gangs, they're not coming.
They went to the administration and they were like, is there a gang problem? And the administration of the schools and the police department were like, no, that's not a problem. Well, there's a problem. There's a 17-year-old boy that got killed. It's a big problem.
The execution-style murder of Nicholas Lee has awoken a growing realization in Roanoke. Not even their community is immune to gang violence.
When you start seeing death out of order, young people being killed in the street, that gets a lot of people's attention. And people are looking at that like, this is not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen this close to home.
Detectives believe Nicholas may have been recruited by a faction of the Crips, known as the Rollin' 30s.
What we found was there was a connection between Roanoke's Rollin' 30 set and the Richmond-based Rollin' 30s. And ultimately, the Rollin' 30s writ large, connecting all the way back to Los Angeles, California.
Could Nicholas have been the victim of a rival gang? Investigators still aren't sure. They zero in on a potentially key piece of evidence, the cell phone found near the scene of the crime.
We plug it in, and once I got a search warrant, we were able to look into the phone and see conversations that were going on right before this murder happened and how they were listed by name. So it was a big piece of information to uncover.
Detectives discover the phone belongs to a young man who goes by the name of DF.
DF was a younger gentleman, and he was also from the school.
On the night of the murder, DF was texting with members of the Rollin' 30s gang, like DeMonte Mack and Trayvon Casey. The texts are all about arranging a meetup in the location where the crime took place, yet they say nothing about a rival gang or a pre-planned crime.
There was no danger indication on that phone that, oh, we're getting ready to do this, or I'm in trouble. His communication ended probably on the phone, probably 10 minutes prior to him getting there. And somehow he's involved 10 minutes later in a murder. We knew we needed to find the owner of the phone and talk to that guy. Maybe he wasn't a suspect. Maybe he's a victim. And so that was a big piece of the puzzle that we had to solve.
Police quickly obtain an address for DF. When they arrive at his home, they find DF hanging out with his girlfriend. Detectives bring them both in for questioning.
He was trying to be the tough guy. I didn't know nothing, didn't do nothing or whatever, but the guy's going to talk to the girlfriend and tell you the real story. So we went in and separated them, talked to the girlfriend.
Right away, DF's girlfriend points the finger at the Rollin' 30s.
She had told us they wanted him to rob people and shoot people and sell drugs. He was like, I don't want to do that. DF was terrible at being a gang member.
Frustrated by DF's refusal to follow orders, the Rollin' 30s came up with a plan to kill him. DF would soon find out that Nicholas was integral to that plan.
They had told him they were going to go meet some girls, and they loaded into 2 separate cars.
So what you've got is Chauncey Levacy and Monty Mack in one car, and you've got Trayvon Casey driving the second car, DF as the front seat passenger, and you've got Nicholas Lee as the back seat passenger.
They drove around, they went to a store. They kind of had this illusion that we're just going to a party, we're going to pick up girls, it's all fine.
They drive out to Tuckawanna. When they get out there, what we find out is somehow Nicholas Lee motions to DF that there's danger.
Nicholas looked back at him and started flashing the gun and making indications physically and non-verbally to warn that there was something that was pretty grim afoot.
According to his girlfriend, DF realized the gang had ordered Nicholas to kill him.
DF's like telling his girlfriend, man, I acted like I had to go to the bathroom and I took off running, and then I hear shots. And I laid there until late in the night.
Based on this account, detectives theorized what likely happened after DF fled the scene.
Whatever happened, they decided that Nicholas Lee did not do his part he was supposed to do, which was kill DF. So they ended up turning the tables and killing Nicholas Lee.
Detective Dillon confronts DF with his girlfriend's account of what happened. He quickly admits it's true.
So from that point on, we had a good grasp on who was there, what happened.
There's just one issue with DF's story. He didn't actually see who shot Nicholas.
He wasn't there. He had taken off running, as a scared teen would. So he didn't know who had pulled the trigger, but he knew who had the guns.
Detectives are also frustrated that DF's story doesn't place suspected gang leader Sean Garant at the scene of the crime.
So we had an idea that Monty Mack and Trayvon Casey were the shooter. The one thing we didn't know at that point was where Sean Garant was.
When the Lee family learns that gangs were indeed responsible for Nicholas's death, they point the finger at the Roanoke School District and City Hall.
The first thing that pops into my brain is I told you so. But the anger, absolute anger at the school system, anybody connected to the political side, and that's a shame because of that disconnect between what we were told and what actually happened.
My parents asked for help. They asked, somebody please help me with my son. Nobody would listen. Nobody.
Police finally catch a lead in the murder of 17-year-old Nicholas Lee after a witness and his girlfriend spill a shocking tale.
The night that Nicholas was murdered, he was tasked to kill another young boy. He was chased, shot in the street because he refused to kill someone else.
The irony's not lost on me that, Nicholas joined this gang because he was looking to find out who he was. And I think who he was came to light. I think he figured out exactly who he was in that day, in that moment.
To have the wherewithal to say, I will not kill, he laid his life down for someone else. The strength of character that he showed in that moment at 17, I don't think we see that in everyone.
Roanoke investigators are determined to hold Nicholas's killers accountable and to strike a fatal blow to the Rolling 30s organization.
If you really want to make an impact on individuals' lives, you go after the leader.
Detectives believe that individual is a violent ex-con named Sean Garant. Just weeks after the killing, detectives are shocked when Garant falls into their lap.
All he had to do was lay low. Just stay under the radar. But 2 weeks later, he goes to a bar and is waving a gun around. He was hanging out with Devon Crowder, who we found was high up in the gang. But what probably nobody knew at that time was we had that bar under surveillance for just other nefarious activities. So there were probably 5 or 6 police officers undercover watching this transpire. So they come zooming in. Well, now Sean Garant gets into a daggone pursuit, crashes a car, has a gun in there, and they bring him into custody.
Garant's associate, Devon Crowder, is also taken into custody. Investigators separate the two men.
Sean Grant was facing 30 years on a gun charge, so he's ready to talk. But he doesn't want to put himself as a gang leader, so he's telling me the guy in the next room, Davon Crowder, is the leader of the gang. Sean, he put himself as a good friend of Nicholas, like he had taken him under his wing. I go, tell me who freaking shot him. And then he's like, man, Monte Mack and Trayvon, they shot him.
According to Sean, the trouble started when Nicholas and DF both began skipping meetings and refusing orders.
And Nicholas and DF just didn't have it in their blood to be a bad guy. I mean, they wanted the lifestyle of hanging out, drinking, partying, stuff like that, but not the hurting people, not the robbing, and not the threats, and not the gun violence.
Nicholas's reluctancy to participate in the more violent and criminal aspects of gang life created problems.
Sean says the final straw came when Nicholas befriended a member of a rival gang.
His friend was another musician, and they had recorded some music together.
That friend just so happened to be affiliated with another gang, the Bloods. And so now everyone's coming to Sean Grant being like, man, like, we see your little homie on social media hanging out with Bloods. Like, that's not a good look for you, dude.
Sean says that the Rolling 30s beat Nicholas up and expelled him from the gang as punishment.
Nicholas thought he was done when he got beat up at school. He thought he was done, but he wasn't.
Sean claims he would have been happy to leave Nicholas alone after the beating, but it was DeMonte Mack who decided to escalate.
Trayvon Casey and Monty Mack gave a gun to Nicholas Lee, and then after he didn't shoot DF, they shot him.
The way the gang saw it, it was survival of the fittest that night. Either Nicholas would shoot DF and prove himself to the gang again, or if he refused, Nicholas would be killed instead. Either way, both Nicholas and DF had become disposable.
Sean Grant, he didn't take responsibility for that. He didn't put himself as the leader. He said he was just a G in the gang, and this would have never happened if he could have controlled it. So I'm just like, hey, hold that right there. Let me make sure that we got this right.
Detective Dillon goes to the next room and tells Devon that Sean has fingered him as the leader of the Rolling 30s.
But Devon, he tells me that you're the leader of the Crips Rolling 30 gang. Oh, Devon didn't want that. He goes, that son of Davon Crowder rolled like a dog at that point. He was like, no, Sean Grant is the leader of the gang.
Detectives suspect Sean ordered the murder, but they can't prove it, and he refuses to admit it. Luckily, he's already going down hard on other charges.
He was carrying a firearm while he's out on probation from his prior murder charge. So he was facing, legally, he was in deep water.
So Sean Grant's in the interview room. We've done a DNA search warrant. We're getting his clothes. He's going to be in an orange jail suit. We ordered some pizza. So I take old Davon Crowder out into the lobby room where we've got these nice little cushioned leather seats and sofas, whatever. I'm like, hey man, you want some pizza? And he's like, yeah. And so we go marching Sean Grant out in handcuffs. And I look at Sean and I go, hey, he's going home tonight because he talked. And I said, I appreciate it. And Davon had cheese hanging off of it, and he was like, no, I didn't want it. And Sean Grant was like, you mother. And that caused quite a bit of unraveling of the Rolling 30s from that point.
But unfortunately, Sean's testimony against Amonte Mack and Trayvon Casey isn't enough to put them behind bars.
At that point, who did we have putting a gun in Trayvon Casey's hand? We had his own gang members. Was that enough? You get a guy with a bad criminal history, using him to testify against another guy with a bad criminal history. It's too hard to prove them as a reliable witness.
So investigators decide to take the case to the feds, where they pursue what's known as a RICO charge. In a federal RICO case, defendants can face tough sentences for crimes that are carried out in service of a criminal organization. But before they can bring any charges, the gang strikes again.
They wanted you to know how malicious they were. They wanted you to know how bad they were. It's like no conscience, no soul, no sorrow.
The rest of the gang, one of the members strikes again.
In February of 2018, Trayvon Casey decides to shoot someone else.
Police arrive at the scene and piece together what happened.
Trayvon Casey orders some weed from an individual named Markel Gertie, who comes to sell it to him.
Markel was a son, he was a brother, he was a father, he was expecting his daughter, and he loved that role of being a provider.
But when Markel showed up, Trayvon turned the tables.
When Markel pulls in the lot to sell it to him, Trayvon Casey walks up to the window, produces a handgun, and shoots him through the clavicle, runs away.
The gang members that killed Nicholas are so violent, so little care about life, that when they shot and killed Markel, it was at point blank over $200 an ounce of marijuana.
Trayvon Casey and the victim had coordinated the sale of the weed and the purchase of the weed through social media. And so we knew almost right away again, Trayvon Casey was involved in the killing of yet another young man in our city.
Investigators are still building the RICO case against Trayvon, so they find a different way to get him off the streets.
So the weekend after Markel Gertie is killed, come to find out that Trayvon had physically assaulted a young woman that he was dating, fled the area, and then proceeded to text that female, threatening messages that he was going to come beat her up and kill her.
Police are able to arrest Trayvon on stalking charges and hold him in custody while they work to put together their RICO case.
There's just a ton of work going on behind the scenes, just trying to get as many of these guys locked up for anything possible that we can while we build the case.
And by digging into Trayvon's phone records, they finally find a way to connect Sean Garant to Nicholas's murder.
So we knew that in the moments after the shooting, Trayvon Casey had made a phone call to Sean Garant, probably 4 minutes after 911 call came in.
Then we get witness testimony, individuals that were with Garant when he received the call, which was essentially Trayvon Casey letting Garant know that his orders had been fulfilled. And that's what we were ready to prove in court, that Garant ordered them to do this.
Over the course of 3 years, Sean Garant, Trayvon Casey, Delmonte Mack, and Chauncey Levacy, who was present at Nicholas's murder as a driver, are all arrested and charged with crimes ranging from federal racketeering to conspiracy to murder.
When we saw them in court, they all had a presence about them. Sean Garant has a great facade, and he knows how to play that facade, and he learned very well. So, I mean, you could easily see how he tricks and gets people to follow him.
You know, there were several times they would look my dad up and down. We made a pact that we would never turn our backs on them, so we would stand in solidarity and make them leave the courtroom first.
All 4 men plead guilty. Their sentencing is held in August 2022, where they are each sentenced to between 35 and 40 years in prison. At the sentencing, the family gives victim impact statements.
Each of us put a year's worth of work into those victim impact statements. And in mine, I said, shame on you, shame on all of you for letting this happen. And I still mean that in my heart of hearts.
I had no problem looking them in the eye and telling them that this is what you did to my family, and this is what you should have to experience the rest of your life.
For the Lee family, however, the verdicts can never replace what they lost.
And not every family would be able to survive this grief because it never goes away.
Whenever I talk about him, yes, I'll smile, but I feel kind of numb because that part is missing of me.
We are forever and always -1. We can't get him back.
It was the sins of the city. The city was trying to hide it, and I think they still are. So are you asking me what I'm going to do to continue on? I'm going to continue to tell Nips a story every chance I get.